Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Pei Amud Aleph, starting with Ayin Tes Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. The Gemara brings back a previously quoted Brisa, but this time in its entirety. Says the Gemara Gufa, Harei Shahoyu Yisrael Mechza Taharin u Mechza Tamein. When you have a situation when half of Klal Yisrael are Tamein and the other half are Taharin. Halalu oisin la'atzmon v'halalu oisin la'atzmon. The din, according to this brisa, is each group make their own korban pesach. The brisa goes on, hayu tamein oitfin ala taharin afilu echot. If there's one additional member of Klal Yisrael who is tamei, and therefore makes a majority of tamein over taharin, yasu betuma, then they all make the korban pesach together in a state of tuma. Because even those who are taharin are nigrar, are nimshach after those who are tamein, the majority, and therefore they all bring the same korban pesach in a state of tuma. Rabbi Eliezer ben Masya oimer. Rabbi Eliezer ben Masya says, "Ein hayochid machriyas atzibur letuma." You cannot have one additional member of Klal Yisrael to give it a majority of tuma. Shenemar brings a pasuk on top of Pei Amud Aleph. Lo tuchal lizboyach et haPesach be'echad shi'arecha. He darshans the pasuk. You are not able to then slaughter the korban pesach be'echad, with one. That means with one additional person who is tamei to make it a majority of tmein. Rabbi Shimon oimer. The Brisa goes on to say the sheet of Rabbi Shimon. Afilu shevet echad. Tamei ushar kol hashvatim taharin. Even if you have a situation where there's one shevet who are tamei, and that one shevet who is tamei is against many shvatim who are taharin, halalu oisin la'atzma, halalu oisin la'atzma. Still, each one will make their own korban pesach. My taima, what's the reason, Rabbi Shimon, to say that even if it's only one shevet, still that one shevet which is tamei makes its own korban pesach and korban pesach rishon? The Rabbi Shimon, his reason is kisovar shevet echad ikri kahal. One shevet is called a kahal, and therefore, as a kahal, it has its independence, therefore to make its own korban. Rabbi Yehuda oimer. Rabbi Yehuda says, afilu shevet echad tamei ushar kol shvatim taharin yasu betuma. He says, when you have one shevet who is tamei, the other ones who are tahor, then they will all make one korban pesach together in a state of tumah. Why? She'ein korban sibur chaluk. Because he says that unlike the sheet of Rabbi Shimon, who makes it so that each one makes a separate korban pesach, but Rabbi Yehuda says that we have the principle she'ein korban sibur chaluk, whereby even those who are taharin, those shvatim that are taharin, will be nimshach achar the shevet that is tamei, and they'll make one korban pesach in a state of tuma. Rabbi Yehuda sovar. Rabbi Yehuda holds shevet echad ikri kahal v'havu palgu ve'en korban sibur chaluk v'avdi kul betuma. And that's Shita Rabbi Yehuda. Again, in contrast to Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yehuda says that they're all considered to be, therefore, going to bring a korban pesach in a state of tuma, because we don't say korban sibur is chaluk. Ad kan the brisa. The Gemara now brings the following statement: Itmar, hayu Yisrael mechza taharin u mechza tamein. When you have a situation when half of Klal Yisrael are taharin and half are tamein, Omar Rav mitamin echad b'sheretz. Rav says, take one of the taharin and mitame him with a sheretz, whereby then there'll be a majority of Tamein. Ask the Gemara, Va'amai, Ne'avdu hani l'chudai v'hani l'chudayu. Why not just say that each group, the half that are Taharim makes their korban pesach, and the half that are Tamein makes their korban pesach? The Ha'amar Rav, halalu oisin la'atzma, halalu oisin la'atzma. Rav himself said, like this Tana of this brisa that we just quoted, that each one makes their separate korban pesach. So why does now Rav say that make one of the taharin a Tuma Sheretz, so that you'll have a majority of Tamein. Amre, they said, Hocha b'mayaskinon kigoin shahayu Tamein oitzvin ala taharin echod. Because here we're talking about a case where you have one additional Tamein that makes it a majority over the Taharin. Ask the Gemara, Ihochi, then havalahu ruba Tamein. Then you have Roiv. And therefore, na'avdu kula betuma. Then it should be that they should all make one carbon Pesach in a state of Tuma, whereby even those who are Tahor will then be included in the carbon Pesach of the Tamein. Says the Gemara, Sofer lo Kerebi Eliezer ben Masya. He's like the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Masya, that one additional person who is Tameh cannot make a majority. Says the Gemara, then go back to the original question, in which case you have half and half. If it's half and half, why does Rav say, cause the one who is Tahor to become Tameh Sheretz? Why don't we just simply say that each group makes their own separate carbon Pesach? Na'avdu hani lechudai v'hani lechudayu. Answers the Gemara, Elohachi Kamar. You're right. Really, we're talking about each one has a half, 50% are Tamein and 50% are Taharin. Not like we suggested before that one additional one is Tameh. It's 50-50. Elohachi Kamar, this is what Rav came to say. I'ikatana the Savar law Kitana Kama. If there is such a Tana who holds like the Tana Kama of the previously quoted Brisa, the Omer who says Palgu Pagol Avde Kula Betuma, he does not hold that each one will then, who says that each one will not make the entire Carbon Pesach together, each one will make it separate. However, Vesava like Rabbi Yehuda, but this Tana not only holds like the Tana Kama, but also holds like Rabbi Yehuda. The Omar ein Carbon Sibur Chaluk, that a Carbon Sibur was not Chaluk, then Metamin Echad Mehem B'Sheretz. Then the thing to do would be then Metamin Echad B'Sheretz. And that's what Rav was coming to say. Since anyways, you have a situation that you want to have according to this Tana, who holds that we don't want to say each one does separately. On the other hand, we also hold like Rabbi Yehuda that says Ein Korban Sibur V'Chaluk, so then make a majority of Tmein by adding one additional person who is Tar to become Tamei Sheretz, whereby the Korban Pesach will be brought in a state of Tuma, and even those who are Taharim will also be included in that Korban Pesach because Ein Korban Sibur Chaluk. The Ula argues on Rav, and he says in a case where half of the Tzibur is Taharin and half the Tzibur is Tmein, says Ula, Meshalchin Echad Mehen LeDerech Rechoika, send the one of them who is Tahor to the Derech Rechoika, to him far away, whereby he'll be then excluded from the Korban Pesach, whereby you'll be left with a Roiv Tzibur of Tmein. Ask the Gemara, why is that the suggestion, Ula? V'yitmena b'sheretz. Why not say like Rav and say, take one of the Taharim and have him Tamei Sheretz? And that way you'll have the Roiv of the Tzibur being Tamein. And that also has an advantage because that will also include him as well to bring the Korban Pesach in Pesach Rishon. Answers the Gemara, Kisover Shoichtin v'Zartin al Tamei Sheretz, because Ula holds that you be Shoichtin the Korban Pesach and Zarek the Dam on somebody who is Tamei Sheretz, because that night you're already become Tahor, be able to eat the Korban Pesach with everybody else. Ask the Gemara, okay, v'yitmena b'meis. So then have the one who is Tahor become Tamei Meis, and then he'll then be the majority, he'll make the majority of Tamein, and there will not be a situation where he can bring the carbon at night. Says the Gemara, because after all, somebody who's Tamei Meis is Tamei for 7 days. The Gemara says, no, Madcheyu ata mechagigaso. If you do that by making Tamei Meis, he'll then also be precluded from bringing a carbon chagiga on Tesvav, on the 15th of Nisan. So Gemara says, but hashtanami midcheyu ata b'pischoi. Also now, you're going to then have him then not be able to then bring the carbon Pesach as well. So why is that any better? Says Gemara, no, Efshir the Avi B'Sheni, because by Korban Pesach, even if he doesn't bring Korban Pesach on Yudalid B'Nisan, but he'll be able to bring it 1 month later on Yudalid B'Iyar. Ask the Gemara, but B'Meis Nami Efshir the Avi B'Shvi, the Havalei Shmini Sheloi, even by somebody who's Thomas Meis, can also bring a Korban Chagiga on the 7th day, which is his 8th day. In other words, since on the 14th he became Tamei Meis, so the 7th day of Pesach will be then the 8th day of his becoming Tahar, whereby he'll be able to bring the Korban Pesach then, the Korban Chagiga then. Says Gemara, Kisavar Ula, because Ula is the Shita, Kulu Tashlumin Darishoin Ninhu. He says, when do we say the Korban Chagiga has a Tashlumin? That's when there was already an initial potential for them to bring the Korban Chagiga on the first day. Then we say if he can't bring it on the first day, for whatever reason, he can bring it on the second day, the third day, the entire week of Pesach. However, if he did not have the potentiality to bring it on the first day, then he can't bring it the rest of the days either. As follows: the chazi berishon, chazi bekulo. If he was chazi on the first day, then he could go ahead and bring the Korban Chagiga and be mashlim the rest of the week. However, but where he's not chazi in the rishon, in this case, he was tumas meis, and therefore he cannot have brought it on the first day. Therefore, we don't give him tashlumim even the rest of the week as well. Omar lahu Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman said, when he heard this statement of Ula, that the eights would be in a case where you have half the tzibur tmein and half the tzibur taharin, that he said, send away one of the taharin to be derech rechoika, whereby you'll have a majority, you'll be left with a majority of tmein. So Rav Nachman, when he heard that, he said, Zilu va'amru la Ula. Go and tell Ula, man sayis the okar sike umashkene verohit. Is anybody going to listen to you to uproot his yesedos, his pegs and his tent, and run away to go to a far off place? Be derech rechoika? Certainly not. And therefore, the eitzah should be like Rav. If you have at tzibur half tmeim and half taharin, then metame one of the taharin to be somebody who is tamei sheretz. Says the Gemara, Itmar, bring the following statement: Hayurubon zavin umiuton tmei mesim. When you have a situation when the roiv of the tzibur are zavin, now zavin cannot bring a Korban Pesach, not in the Rishon and not in the Sheni if he's still a zavin. In fact, even if there's a majority of tmei mesim, those who are tamei, that can bring the Korban Pesach in the first month, Yudalid ben Nisan, the Zavin do not bring the Korban then. Says the Gemara, what happens when you have Roiv Zavin and Miut Tmei Mesim? Omar Rav says, Oison Tmei Mesim, Einon Oisin Loi Barishim Lo B'Sheni. He says, those who are Tmei Mesim do not bring not the first Korban Pesach, not the second Korban Pesach. As follows, Barishoin, he doesn't bring, because loy avdei dahava miuto umiyuto laavdei barishon. The Tmei Mesim are only miutim, and since they're only miutim, they don't bring the Korban Pesach Rishon. Basheni nami loy avdei. They also don't bring the Korban Pesach Sheni, because why? Kol heicha da avdei tzibur barishon. Only when there is a tzibur that brings on the Korban Pesach Rishon, then there's a miut that brings on the Korban Pesach Sheni. Then avi yachid Sheni. Kol heicha da loy avdei tzibur Rishon loy avdei yachid Sheni. And since there's no tzibur that brings it on Korban Pesach Rishon in this case, so therefore there's not going to be a yachid in the case of the Tmei Mesim that will bring the Korban Pesach Sheni. Omar lahu Shmuel. Shmuel said to them, Zilu amru leila Abba, go send a message to Abba, referring to Rav. That was a term of endearment that they used to call Rav Abba. V'yasu, and tell him, V'yasu b'nei Yisrael z'apezah b'mayadoi, ma'avidatolei. What are you going to do with the pasuk? It says, and Klal Yisrael shall perform the Korban Pesach in its appointed time. And therefore, how can you not allow the Tmei Mesim to bring the Korban Pesach on its appointed time in such a situation? Omar lilhu, Rav responds to Shmuel, Zilu amrulei. He says, go and tell Shmuel the following message back. What are you going to do in a situation when all of the tzibur are zavin? Elo Kivan the loy efsher loy efsher. Since it is not possible to perform the Korban Pesach in its appointed time, because we're talking about a tzibur who is zovin, so it's not efsher. Then hachanami loy efsher too. It's not efsher over here.